Welcome to the March 15th, 2022 Board of Supervisors. At this time, we will be going into closed session, and I'm going to allow the clerk to read out the closed session agenda.
Item number 1, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, Calaveras Planning Coalition versus Calaveras County Board of Supervisors et al., Calaveras County Superior Court case number 19CB 44471.
And with that, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment online.
Okay. And there's none in the room. Okay, with that, we'll see you at 9 o'clock. Thank you. Supervisors, if you could please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I will turn it over to the clerk for a report out earlier closed session and report out for the 223 closed session.
Closed session item number 1 from today's meeting, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, Calaveras Planning Coalition versus Calaveras County Board of Supervisors et al., Calaveras County Superior Court case number 19CV 44471. There was no reportable action taken. Closed session for the February 23rd agenda, pursuant to Government Code Section 54657B1, pursuant public employment, title planning director. There was no reportable action taken.
Okay. Thank you. At this time, we will go to staff announcements. We have Ms. Medina.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Madam Chair, respective board members, CAO Von Lada, Deputy Clerk of the Board, and our Calaveras community. Lisa Medina, Environmental Management Agency. This past Saturday, we had a record-breaking rabies vaccine and microchip clinic. We vaccinated over 220 pups and kitties and chipped over 98 fur babies. This is our best record yet. We also broke the record in donations. We brought in $6,017. Thank you to our Calaveras community for your ongoing support. Your support gives us strength and makes our jobs extra special in knowing that you support us and that you have faith in us. We would like to give a special shout out and a very special thank you to our focus members and all our volunteers, including Drs. Kathy and Steve Gaitlin, Christine Albertine, Debbie Beaufort, Ivy Morrow, Joanne Elliott, Marie Shine, like in the sun, Lenora Woods, Kathy Nucio, Lacey White, Katie Miller, Jenna and Emma McKeon, Bobby Pyle, Patty and Dawn Payne, Melissa Hamry, and last but not least, Sarah Corley. I guess I need glasses. Anyways, I want to give them a very special thank you for their volunteer and for their participation. And a big warm thanks to our Calaveras community for bringing their fur babies in and protecting them and our community by ensuring their pets are protected and that they will be able to find their way home if they should ever get lost. Our next free rabies and microchip clinic will be held here again at the Government Center on Saturday, April 9th from 9 a.m. to noon. Let's break another record, Calaveras community. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Is there any other staff announcements?
There is none online.
Okay. That we will move on to recognition and acknowledgement. We have 2 proclamations. Can you read out number 2, please?
Item number 2 is a proclamation from the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors. Adopt a proclamation recognizing March 2022 as American Red Cross Month in Calaveras County.
Okay. And then I believe Ms. Crane is here and would like to speak. Come on.
Good morning. With me today is Carolyn Steinmes from Copperopolis.
Good morning.
we're just really honored to be here, and we want to thank the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors for declaring March as Red Cross Month. I have a few things I wanted to share with you, and so I don't go into a rabbit trail like you know I can. I'm going to read a few. Okay. Help cannot wait during emergencies. Volunteers represent 90% of the Red Cross workforce, powering its mission with blood and financial donors, community partners, and people trained in life-saving skills. In just the first 2 months of 2022, the constant need for our support is underscored by the intensity of our work across the country. Red Cross workers responded day and night to help more than 37,000 people devastated by more than 10,000 home fires in the United States. A flurry of emergency relief efforts following one of the most active years of severe weather disturbance and disasters. During the first ever national blood crisis in January and February, more than 600,000 blood and platelet donors rolled up their sleeve for someone in need. Now that's saving lives with a renewable resource. I think we can all get behind that. So thank you. Through more than 10,000 emergency messages, Red Cross workers connected service members with their loved ones back home, such as helping to facilitate their return home following an emergency in the family. This past year, Red Cross volunteers in Calaveras County have assisted families affected in need by various disasters such as wildfires, snowstorms with trees through their homes, single-family house fires, and responded to 15 residential house fires last year and provided services to 37 people. We responded to winter storm and freezing cold and power outages. We opened shelters. We supported warming and cooling centers with our county partners. And then we've done outreach to teach preparedness to our communities and our youth. We've partnered with our local fire departments and Cal Fire to install smoke alarms to make homes safer and help educate those in the home on making an evacuation plan and go over those safety plans. Red Cross volunteers are dedicated to helping those in need. I would be remiss if I did not stand here today and remind everyone, oh, you probably have them, everyone to, by the time the sun sets today, at least start your go bag. Don't forget important things. There are lists everywhere that can tell you if you need some help with a list. I can give that to you, or you can check in with redcross.org or OES or Public Health. Everybody's got these. I think the Sheriff's Department probably has them on their website as well. But I will say, if you come to my shelter and you have not packed your fresh underlovelies, I'm not giving you mine. So, anyway, if you're interested in becoming a volunteer, please go online to redcross.org. Respectfully, I'm Marty Crane and my wonderful volunteer friend, Caroline. We're here on behalf of Debbie Calcote, our program manager. I haven't done this in a while. I think I'm a little out of practice, but I wanted to also share with you some key points about Red Cross worldwide. We're not just here in Calaveras County when you see us here. We're across the whole state, we're across the whole country, and worldwide. Every country has its own Red Cross organization, but we all work together. And so I just wanted to mention that with regard to Ukraine, it's uppermost in a lot of people's minds, and Marita, thank you for your colors. As conflict continues to escalate in Ukraine, the Global Red Cross Network is working together to support people affected by this devastating humanitarian crisis. And by the way, we know that Ukraine is not the only one with a humanitarian crisis. In neighboring countries, the Global Red Cross Network is working tirelessly to provide emergency aid to people seeking safety and to improve conditions for those in harm's way. The Global Red Cross Network has mobilized thousands of volunteers and staff, particularly at border crossings and train stations. Teams are providing critical support in Belarus, Hungary, Moldova, Poland, Romania, Russia, Slovakia, Lithuania, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. I think I said that not quite right. And other countries where Ukrainians have fled. Thank you to those countries for assisting. Together, International Red Cross workers are distributing food, water, clothing, hygiene sets, medical supplies, as well as providing medical care and mental health support. Providing SIM cards so that families can stay connected amid the turmoil. First aid training for thousands of people sheltering in metro stations and bomb shelters. Helping to evacuate people with disabilities and assisting first responders to save lives. While the American Red Cross is not in Ukraine, we have deployed staff members to Romania, Moldova, Poland, and other European countries to support humanitarian relief efforts for Ukrainians. We've also deployed team members to serve U.S. military personnel and their families, U.S. State Department staff and their families, and others who are returning to the United States. In light of this evolving humanitarian crisis, many organizations are providing critical support to those in need. And as no one organization can do it alone. We all know that we have many partners here, and we are one of many partners. So thank you for acknowledging that. At the American Red Cross, we're asking the American public to join that effort through the American Red Cross, or any other charity of their choice. Financial contributions can be made to the American Red Cross by simply writing Ukraine humanitarian effort crisis in the memo line. And we all remember what it was like during the Butte fire. Everyone's hearts just spilled open and brought us everything they thought these families could need, which involved a lot of clothing, but they didn't have any closets at the time. So we've learned some things. So we're requesting that you do not send in-kind goods such as food and clothing, blankets or toys. Better to send a financial donation so that what is needed can be purchased where it's needed. In the past 8 years, International Red Cross teams have provided food, fuel, and heating, medical supplies, and support for housing to those living close to or on the line of contact. So it just hasn't been recently. It's been the last 8 years and before that. The American Red Cross plays a different role in international crisis than in domestic disasters. We maintain a roster of disaster specialists to deploy and to provide aid during global crises. We have deployed team members to neighboring countries, not to Ukraine, to help manage the International Red Cross operation. International disaster responders are highly specialized and experienced professionals with specific technical skills and expertise. So you might wonder how the International Red Cross teams are helping those in need. In cold temperatures and COVID-19 and chronic uncertainty, we make basic needs in Ukraine a challenge. We've provided first aid training for more than 2,000 people sheltering in metro stations and the bomb shelters, coordinating with the Polish Red Cross. There's more that I could share with you, but what I want to share with you is that we really need your help. And if you could go to redcross.org, you can find anything you want to know. Or we have locals here that are happy to talk to you. I'd like to turn this over to Carolyn. She has some firsthand experience with services to the armed forces and our members. We were in Cascades region. You want to share that? Well, maybe.
Thank you. I was not prepared for anything.
I know.
I'm sorry. I've been a member for about 7 years now, and I have deployed. I am currently the Disability Integration Regional Lead, and I also do what's called event reviews for the Red Cross, also a regional position. I help out with sheltering and debt, and I also do review of debt work. Those are my duties. Thank you.
The sort of things that Carolyn does are like other things that so many others do that make us effective and able to respond at a moment's notice. We see people come up all the time when there's a crisis and we have a shelter and they want to help. In order to help at a moment's notice, you need to be a little bit prepared. So let's all get prepared by going to redcross.org and looking at what you can do, it's not a lot, to get ready so that you too can respond with us as a partner in an emergency. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marty. With that, I will turn it over to Supervisor Stopper.
Thank you both. I have the honor today of reading this proclamation. What's left of it, I think you pretty much touched on all the bases for me, Ms. Crane. Whereas, in times of crisis, people in Calaveras County come together to take care of one another. This humanitarian spirit is part of the foundation of our community and is exemplified by American Red Cross volunteers and donors. And whereas, in 1881, Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross, turning her steadfast dedication for helping others into a bold mission of preventing and alleviating people's suffering. Today, more than 140 years later, we honor the kindness and generosity of Red Cross volunteers here in Calaveras County, who continues to carry out Clara's life-saving legacy. They join the millions of people across the United States who volunteered, give blood, donate financially, or learn vital life-preserving skills through the Red Cross. And whereas in Calaveras County, the contributions of local Red Cross volunteers give hope to the most vulnerable in their darkest hours, whether it's providing emergency shelter, food, and comfort for families devastated by local disasters like home fires, snow events, trees into homes, and donating essential blood for accident and burn victims, heart surgery and organ transplant patients, and those receiving treatment for leukemia, cancer, or sickle cell disease, supporting service members and veterans along with their families and caregivers through the unique challenges of military life, helping to save the lives of others with first aid, CPR, and other skills, or delivering international humanitarian aid. And whereas their work to prevent and alleviate human suffering is vital to strengthening our community's resilience, we dedicate this month of March to all those who continue to advance the noble legacy of American Red Cross founder Clara Barton, who lived by her words, "You must never think of anything except the need and how to meet it." We ask others to join in this commitment to give back to our community. Is there any further public comment to this item?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Corey Allen, Health and Human Services Agency Director. I just wanted to point out that in the short 10 months that I've been here in Calaveras County, I have never seen such responsiveness as I've seen from our local Red Cross team. Working alongside Debbie Calcote, who Marty just mentioned, I have watched her go hours upon hours working not only in Calaveras County, but across the multiple counties across our region during wildfires and winter storms. So I just wanted to point out that working alongside this team from the human services perspective, it's been an outstanding partnership. And on a personal level, the Red Cross helped me during 9/11 when I lost a fallen firefighter who was my Uncle Nick. And they sent my sister and I to New York in order to be there with my family while we waited to find the results of what happened, and it was due to the Red Cross that I was able to be there with my family. So with that, I want to say thank you to the Red Cross and to our local partners and introduce our Emergency Preparedness Coordinator.
Hi, good morning, board. Thank you very much. Christopher Edgerly, I'm your Emergency Preparedness and Response Manager for Public Health. I can't say enough about the Red Cross. They really work well with us and our emergency preparedness here in this county. And Marty Crane and Debbie Calcote have been absolutely fantastic when we put up cooling centers or warming centers, even our congregate shelters. They are their number one people that we lean on when we need them. I can't speak enough about them, and thank you very much for this proclamation.
Thank you. If there's...
You have to know, it's just not me and not Debbie, it's a whole team. So we might be the first line, but it goes out to everybody else.
Absolutely, Marty, thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Callaway and a second by Chair Fullendorf. All those in favor? Aye. Passes on a 4-0.
You can also vote for Supervisor Garamendi.
No.
I'll go ahead and do it because council says no. But passes on a 401 absent who would like to vote yes on this, absolutely.
Got it.
Now therefore be it resolved, the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors proclaim March 2022 as American Red Cross Month in Calaveras County. We encourage all Americans to support this organization and its noble humanitarian mission. You can help by donating, giving blood, or becoming a Red Cross volunteer. Visit the Red Cross webpage at, as Miss Marty Crane says, www.redcross.org/local/California/gold country, and I will not repeat the rest of it. But thank you very much. We really do appreciate you all. Do you both want to come up here, Miss Allen and our emergency from Health and Human Services?
Bring them on. Just put everybody in the picture.
It takes a community. I don't know if the sheriffs are willing to take a picture with us right here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Take care.
Sorry, I'm going to say. Oh, that's why you're counsel. We don't have to take the advice.
We can do whatever we want, remember? Oh, those words come back.
Okay.
Thank you for your recommendation, Council.
Thank you, Marty. Next, we'll move on to the next proclamation. Clerk.
Item number 3 is a proclamation from the Sheriff's Department. Adopt a proclamation recognizing the commitment of the Calaveras County Sheriff's Volunteer Unit for the year 2021.
I believe we have the sheriff. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Fullendorf, members of the board, Ms. Von Lotta, Ms. Edwards. This is actually a pretty fantastic day for us. I brought a lot of backup today. We're all looking for some more money. Volunteers haven't had a raise since 1989, and they would like one. So all seriousness aside, or joking aside, these group of folks, and this is only half of the volunteers that we have right now, I think, in our county. These folks do a lot of good work for us. They're very much appreciated. I don't think that they get the recognition and appreciation that they deserve for everything that they do. The last couple of years have been a little thin as far as the work they've been able to do. However, this proclamation is going to show what they did do during COVID. When everybody else was staying home, they were still out helping. They were helping HHSA, and Mr. Callaway will be reading that. I don't know if my undersheriff wants to say anything. He's worse than me. He talks more than I do. So.
We're going to read the proclamation, but some things, some small details that couldn't be inserted in there. A couple of weeks ago, our gate broke at the back of the sheriff's office. One of our volunteers was out there standing in the pouring rain, escorting people in and out. It's the little things that we can't always include. Health and Human Services is here to support the volunteers as well as Red Cross. They did a lot of transportation, somewhat security at some of the vaccination sites. They really did step up. COVID did kind of throw them for a loop. They weren't able to meet, obviously, for a period of time. Then they started meeting out at the fairgrounds. We'd like to thank the fairgrounds for allowing them to meet out there. But this is a fantastic group. I've been through 3 leadership changes with the volunteers over the years, and Betty Miner, our volunteer captain, is a fantastic lady. She has really kind of grown the group. They often get together after meetings and have lunches together. And although they don't get paid, their reward is kind of in their camaraderie and the service they provide to the community. So I want to thank her and point her out specifically, but I do want to thank all of the group for all of their work for the last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment? No? Okay, then I will turn it over to Supervisor Callaway.
Thank you. This is definitely my honor. The Calaveras County Sheriff's Office Volunteer Unit, as the sheriff said, was formed in 1989 to assist the sheriff's office with administrative and other duties in the department. Whereas the sheriff's volunteers staff and operate the sheriff's substation, the first one was in Arnold, and assist with, that's not on here, but you've got me, so, and with public events throughout the county, and routinely patrol Calaveras County with marked patrol cars that are usually very clean. And in 21, the sheriff's office worked 61 events, including, including the parade at White Pines on Blagan Road that was like 1/8 of a mile long. And truly, if it wasn't for the volunteers, that would not have come to fruition. So thank you. That's not in here either. And including 17 days at the Calaveras Fairgrounds. Do y'all jump frogs, Betty, when you're out there? Well, we'll have to change that. Conducting traffic control for COVID vaccination clinics. And whereas in 2021, the sheriff's volunteers conducted 86 vacation house checks, aided 377 citizens and visitors of Calaveras County who had walked in to the substations, including in Arnold, and 208 people who called in the sheriff's substations for assistance. Whereas in 2021, the 29 members patrolled 49,458 miles and donated 11,709 and a half hours to the citizens of Calaveras County, which is believed to be a one-year high record, or a one-year record high, for volunteer hours working in the unit. And whereas since the Sheriff's Volunteer Unit was formed, they've donated a grand total of over 108,000 hours of dedicated service to the citizens of Calaveras County. And I would like a motion, please, to approve this proclamation.
So moved. Second.
I'll tell you, hard crowd. A motion by Supervisor Tuffanelli, a second by Supervisor Stopper. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes on a 4-0 with Garamendi, who would have voted yes if he had been here. Is that right? God. Now therefore be it declared that the Board of Supervisors recognizes the Sheriff's Volunteer Unit for their exemplary service to the citizens of Calaveras County. Thank you very much. Did you want to say something? Come on, do you want to say something?
Come on, Betty, you know
Betty,
what to say.
come on.
Come on.
Okay, I wasn't prepared for this either. I've been with the unit for 18 years and loved every minute of it. And am I getting ready to retire? No, not yet. But what makes, for me, a lot of the fun are the people. We really enjoy each other. They're so dedicated. I say, hey, we need some people to do some things. Boom. Sometimes it's emails. Sometimes within an hour it's covered. And how can you retire from something that enjoyable? So, thank you.
Let's go get our Kodak moment. They will Photoshop us, I promise. Captain White, did you want to join us?
No, ma'am.
The sheriff? Yeah, the sheriff.
Sure.
Jim's your boss? You get combat? Yes, absolutely.
This is chaos.
Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. With that, I'll move on. I'm going to take a 5-minute break to let everybody. Okay. Good. Thank you and welcome back. We will now go into general public comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agenda may be addressed during public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking any action on a matter that is not posted on the agenda unless it's determined to be an emergency. Is there any public comment on items not on the agenda?
Over there.
The clerk will.
Where does it go? Over here?
Ms. Newman?
Yes, sir. Design. Oh, take this one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I spoke last week. Today I'm speaking for my neighbor. Good morning. My name is Jane Verche, and I live at 2528 Double Springs Road. First, I'm very tired of the law protecting PG&E from the devastating destruction caused by them in the fires, the loss of property, and deaths. All these things could have been avoided if they simply updated their infrastructure. Now PG&E wants to come down Double Springs Road, cutting down the trees, replacing them with power poles or underground. This they want to do to provide power to Valley Springs from their power station located on Highway 26. There are two alternatives, one going down Highway 12, and the other is actually coming down Double Springs Road without removing any trees. The solution to this is putting in computerized circuit breakers. With the technical advancements available, it would render wildfires a thing of the past. Multifunctional protection relays that remotely shut down feeder circuits and steel core insulated conductor cables lasting up to 40 years, thus saving trees and properties from fires connected to power lines. Finally, PG&E has lobbied for and influenced legislation and public opinion into believing that this is their only way to protect us from fires. When upgrading its outdated utility infrastructure is the real answer. I do not, nor do any of the residents on Double Springs want our trees cut down because PG&E says it's the only way they can do it. Thank you. Jane did research and found something about these conductors, and I will let you contact her for more information. That's one of the problems we have is cutting down the trees. The other, of course, is the traffic, the speed of the traffic, and the lack of consideration for a narrow, winding little road with many hills and bumps where seniors live. I kind of counted heads. I think everybody on Double Springs, at least 90% of us are over the age of 70, and we can't get across the road like we used to. We can't even walk down the road like we used to. It's becoming a hardship and a danger to us. So consider that, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Glenn Nakagawa. I live there on 3000 Gillum Road. All the property from both sides of Gillum Road is property that I own, and I graze cattle out there. The proposed underground transmission line, and it's going to be placed on the north side of Double Springs Road. In doing so, they're going to eliminate a half a mile of my fence, and also there's approximately 35 trees that they're going to take out. Now, there's alternative ways to access the transmission line to Valley Springs without going through Double Springs Road. I mean, that road's well over 100 years old. That's the reason they put in Highway 26 bypass right to Toyo, because Double Springs Road is too narrow, too crooked, and very steep in many places. I'm on the north side of Double Springs Road, and that covers, like I said, a half a mile of fence line. And let me tell you, that fence is over 100 years old too. So I wish that PG&E would review their proposed transmission line. There's alternative routes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Is there anything online on Zoom?
There is no online
Oh.
comment.
Hi, Marty.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Yeah.
I am over 70. I usually get up a little quicker. I just wanted to say that I know we're talking about PG&E and the project, but I also want to hearken back to the speeds on Double Springs Road. I never pull into Bonnie's driveway or anyone else's driveway anymore, because trying to get out of there, you literally take your life in your own hands. So, because people speed 50, 60, 70 miles an hour in there. Anyway, so I just wanted to mention that again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Seeing none, thank you everyone for your comment this morning. Next, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Is there any board member that wishes to pull a consent agenda item? Seeing none, is there any staff? Is there any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
That's a 4-0-1. Jack would vote yes if he was here. Okay. Moving on to the regular agenda, I will turn it over to the clerk.
Item number 8 is an action item from the Administrative Office. Provide direction to staff regarding recommendations for congressionally directed spending requests.
Good morning, Mia.
Good morning. How are you?
We're good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for taking the time to visit with me again. I really appreciate the opportunity. May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So it's good to be here. Good to see everyone again. I'm here for further discussion of the county's draft request for fiscal year 23 congressional directed spending request, or earmarks, sought through the federal appropriations process. As we discussed last time I was engaged with you, I think that was February 22nd, it appears that Congress is willing to go forward again in fiscal year 23 with earmark requests from members, which they brought back again in fiscal year 22 after a 10-year hiatus. So the last time I was here, the board directed me to do two things. First, revise the U.S. DOT request to $2 million for right-of-way for the eastern segment of the State Route 4 wagon trail. And two, to revise the two earlier requests that we had put together for HUD and economic development funds and fold them into a broader request for the development of a resilient health and human services agency campus to consolidate the county HHSA activities. So we've done that, and you should see before you the two requests, one again for $2 million right-of-way activities for State Route 4 wagon trail realignment, and the second request, which is the new request number 4, is for $1.5 million in HUD economic development funds for the planning and design of the Calaveras County project, a resilient health and human services agency campus. The idea here is really twofold. One, a centralized campus for HHSA activities for a more efficient delivery of services to the community with navigation assistance for those services as well. And two, really kind of focusing on a healthier lifestyle for the resilient campus. The second piece would be to build an outdoor multi-purpose green infrastructure park as part of the overall campus, but the outdoor part, with recreational trails and a skate park. In addition to that, we'd have an indoor facility which would allow for indoor community kitchen for use to take healthy cooking classes, and perhaps if there's room for an outdoor community garden. My view of this is that in order to really put some urgency around this and to make it a more compelling request for our senators, what I'd like to do is when we get the applications, and we don't have them yet, they haven't developed them in the Senate Appropriations Committee yet, but when they do get them and we are applying, I'd like to spell out that the Resiliency Center is also to provide assistance in times of natural disasters and emergencies. We're in a high-risk territory, of course, for wildfires, and we need to provide the resources to the community during that time and direct traffic and make sure that community members are safe and to provide them the services they need. So I'd like to include the statistics on our high-risk area, our history of fires, and fold that into the emergency piece to really raise the urgency and make this a higher priority for our senators, because they'll be getting plenty of requests, and I want to carve out that this is really a high vulnerability area with high risk that's remote, mountainous, and really paint a much more compelling story for our senators so that they give us every consideration. As I mentioned, the applications are not out yet. What we have before us is the President's budget for fiscal year '23 is due out next week, so hopefully that stays on schedule, and that's really the formal kickoff to the appropriations process. Once that comes out, hearings begin, and after that, the House and the Senate will decide on their applications for these earmark requests. The House always acts first, and then the Senate moves into it. So I expect to see the application in maybe the next month or so. We're monitoring that very closely, obviously, but today is about trying to build consensus around our requests. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to you all for questions.
Is there any comment by board members? Marita, Supervisor Callaway.
Yeah, considering it starts in the House, and our representative in the House does not support these, what happens, so we then go to our senators, so what happens in the translation from the House to the Senate regarding our projects?
Good question. What we have here is a process where each body creates their own piece of legislation. So the House will develop its own appropriations bill, and the Senate will develop their own. We, as I mentioned, I think last time, because our House member does not support or pursue earmarks, we will not be formally submitting an application to him, but we will be sharing the information that we'll be providing to our senator so he understands our request, because the congressman has been helpful in the past, and I believe he will be again with the agencies. So once we get into the game and the funding is being considered, when we get to the agency part of the discussions, he will be willing to support us in that way. So I want him to understand what our requests and needs are. But the shorthand version is each body will develop their own bill, so we have a good fighting chance.
My second question is, the ask will come through different agencies. Will it be hinged on what their appropriations might be when the budget comes out? So
Thank you. Thank you for that. What it's really tied to, in the big picture, yes, but actually, when you think about the concept of two bills, a House bill and a Senate bill, the Congress decides how much funding each agency gets. So it will really be a reflection about how much funding Congress will provide for each agency. So within each bill, Congress will, in this case, the Senate will decide how much they want to give DOT, how much they want to give HUD, that kind of thing. And within that context, then we see the requests from the members. And there is a overall limit for earmarks of, I believe, 1% of discretionary funding can be used for earmarks. So it's not a big proportion, but it is quite a change for Congress to go back to this. So thank you for that. When the budget comes out, that'll be the administration's view about how much each agency gets. Congress will look at that and then develop their own view and their own bill. So it will really come out of what Congress decides how much funding for each agency. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Is there any other board question, comment on this? Is there any staff remarks?
There is no staff remarks.
Okay, online, okay. Well, then I'll go to, Supervisor Stopper.
Mia, I just want to thank you for all the work you do for us. We really appreciate it. Keep up the good fight.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it.
If there's nothing else from the board members, I'm going to put it out. Oh,
no, that's all right. Go ahead.
I'm going to go out for public comment. Is there any public comment?
There's no public
No.
comment.
Okay. Supervisor Callaway?
I strongly support number one for the Department of Transportation. I think can show a good faith effort on what we've done in the past and what the county and the state are doing also as part of that. Knowing just a little bit what I've heard other counties or states are submitting, number four would, I think, have a much harder time without the disaster relief component, so I'd recommend may spend time on both of them, but depending on where the budget comes out and the allocation, number four seems a little bit more difficult to achieve, but how much of her time do we want spending on that? I'm not sure we can answer now, but I think we all, from what I've heard of prior discussions, support that concept.
Okay. Is there any other board? We do need to give Mia feedback, so what is and she disappeared.
Well, we lost some feed here.
Can you hear us, Mia?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. they're
Okay.
back. I, to a certain degree, I agree with Ms. Callaway. No, number four, but that's why it's number four on the priority list. But I would work towards more resiliency and disaster relief also. I think that's definitely a hook when that budget comes out. And I think that there may be more opportunities with that. So I would add that in, sort of in line, 4, 5, both things are important. But if we can achieve something more substantial with going down the resiliency and relief road, I'm completely in favor of that. There's many ways that applies to Calaveras County.
I think that's good advice from you and Supervisor Callaway. We do need to make this a request that rises to a priority level. And I think really sharing our circumstances and our history about how this is a very high-risk wildfire area and the services needed around that really will help raise the priority. It's I think, the best angle that we have to stand it up among other competing priorities. So I'm happy to do that. Thank you for raising that, and thank you, Supervisor Callaway, for bringing that to my attention.
Any other comment? No?
No, I will comment. Thank you, Mia, and I appreciate your comments on item 4 and being able to make it presentable and at least up there to where we can at least have some hope on getting some funding for it. I would be in favor of what you were talking about, a resiliency center and a disaster relief center as part of it, packaged together would make it more appealing, I agree. And I strongly agree with number 1. Obviously, this is something that, as Marita said, both state and county have pitched in at least for the first phase of it, and we're looking for funding the second phase of it to finish it off. We're talking about 2.3 miles here, and it certainly fits in with that realm of disaster relief and emergency. Not only emergency, people be able to leave the county in times of disaster, but also more accessible for emergency vehicles getting into the disaster area. Right now, they have to go all the way around because it's just not, the road's just not equipped for them to get through there very quickly. So,
correct. Yeah, great points. All of those will be fleshed out in the application to make it as compelling as we can, and it's a very good story to tell, and we do have that urgent need. So we will do everything in our power to shape that with staff to make it as compelling as we can. Thank you.
I agree with all the statements made. One other highlight I would expand on with the Resiliency Center is we saw it during the Washington fire, Cala, and obviously other in the Tamarack. Is it's not just for our constituents, but we're a regional hub as well to possibly be supporting other disasters surrounding us that do impact us, but the fleeing of others to get to a safe place. So being able to, with this request, make sure we have that recognized. It's not just for us, it's the surrounding areas to get in and out as well. So.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mia, do you have your direction from us then?
With the support of these two, as we have identified and fleshed out today, yes, I believe I have the direction to go forward with these two and work with staff as the applications come forward to reflect these two priorities. So thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anything?
Thanks so much, Mia.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Mia.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Look forward to working together.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 9. Clerk.
Item number 9 is an informational item from planning. Your staff presentation concerning the greenhouse gas emissions inventory and reduction plan, and direct staff to proceed with the reduction plan using the existing inventory.
Thank you. Gina, you are up.
I'm ready. Good morning, everyone. I'm Gina Cathan, your county interim planning director. Just a short introduction here, and then I'll go ahead and introduce our consulting team to get on with the presentation. So just kind of a little recap. As part of the 2019 general plan update, the county adopted a conservation and open space element to establish goals, policies, and implementation measures to address air quality and greenhouse gases. These also serve as mitigation measures developed as part of the EIR to mitigate potentially significant air quality and greenhouse gas impacts. These measures, COS 5B and COS 5C, require the county to undertake a greenhouse gas emissions inventory to establish baseline levels of greenhouse gases generated from all major emission sources in the county, and to develop a greenhouse gas reduction plan outlining the strategies, goals, and actions for contributing to the overall reduction in greenhouse gas emissions consistent with AB 32 and SB 32. We partnered up with the City of Angels and the Calaveras Council of Governments to fund and procure a consulting team headed up by the Sierra Business Council. We broke the project down into 2 phases. Phase 1 inventory was completed in September of last year and presented to the Planning Commission. After 3 meetings, the Commission is passing along Phase 1 to you, but not without concerns. Their primary concern was that some of the data developed to determine what Calaveras County's baseline greenhouse gas emissions were did not come from Calaveras specific studies. As a result, the team realized that we kind of needed to take a step back and maybe better explain what we intend to accomplish with this and how we got to where we are today with the project in hopes of getting direction before moving forward with Phase 2 reduction plan. With that, our consulting team has prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you, and they're waiting in the wings. So let me introduce Sherry Ho and Meredith Anderson, both with the Sierra Business Council.
Hello, nice to meet everyone. Thank you for having us here today. We're going to jump right into the presentation. Meredith is going to present for us today, and It's about a 15-minute presentation, and we'll take any of your questions after it. Thank you. Is it okay for me to share screen and present? Yes. Okay. Let's see. All right, is this working for folks? Can everyone see that?
We can see your screen now.
Great, thank you so much.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us to speak today about Calaveras County's greenhouse gas reduction planning process. My name is Meredith Anderson, and I am a climate planning technician at Sierra Business Council, the lead consultant on this project. And I'm joined by my colleague, Sherry Howe. And we have also been working on this project with Rincon Consultants and Harris and Associates. Go to the next slide. So today we'll be talking about the project timeline and next steps, what the virtual public outreach process will entail, what the greenhouse gas reduction plan and example reduction measures could look like. We will briefly review the results of the community-wide and government operations inventories, go over key takeaways, and finally look at target setting and conclusions. Just to give you a brief overview of what the process has looked like thus far, this project has been divided into two main phases. Phase 1 covers the development of the greenhouse gas inventory, which included emissions forecasting and target setting, which started in September of 2020. In November of 2021, we kicked off Phase 2, which covers the development of the greenhouse gas reduction plan and the CEQA process. Starting next month, we will be holding initial discussions with the Planning Commission regarding the draft reduction measures and have a public outreach process to gather feedback from the Calaveras County community. After the reduction plans are complete, the CEQA process will begin and continue through early 2023. The next steps, like I mentioned before, the greenhouse gas inventory portion is complete. And now we're working on the greenhouse gas reduction plan and planning the public process, which will likely be a pre-recorded presentation with a survey for community members to complete afterwards. There will also be an office hours session so that people are able to comment live if they would like to. The feedback from this public outreach process will ultimately inform the greenhouse gas reduction plan, and we will also get feedback from the Planning Commission on measures. And after that will come the CEQA documentation process. All right, so the virtual public outreach process, this will be, so in the pre-recorded presentation, we will introduce the planning process, present the greenhouse gas inventory findings, and discuss potential reduction measures and plan development. And then after watching the pre-recorded presentation, there will be a link provided for a supplemental survey for feedback from the public. Once that survey closes, there will be an office hours session for those who would like to make live comments. All right, so what is a greenhouse gas reduction plan and how will it impact Calaveras County? So this plan includes guidelines for reducing greenhouse gases. It will provide both quantitative and qualitative measures to reach emissions reduction targets that the county will establish. And as a whole, it is a product of a collaborative process with the county, the community, and other stakeholders. So why is it important and what are the benefits to the county? When reduction measures are implemented, they will create opportunities to access funding. Examples of this include the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program, Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program, Cal Fire Forest Health Improvement Program, Wood Business and Workforce Development Program, and the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Program. Just to name a few, those are funding opportunities that include a greenhouse gas reduction component. So through this, it will create jobs for county residents, save the county and its residents money, improve air, water quality, and public health, increase the county's resilience to the impacts of climate change, support economic development, and streamline the environmental analysis required for CEQA project evaluations. All right, so the greenhouse gas reduction plan layout will include an introduction explaining the context. There will be chapters outlining the greenhouse gas emissions, the emissions forecast, and the emissions reduction targets, and another chapter giving an overview of the public and stakeholder engagement processes. So the bulk of the greenhouse gas reduction plan will include the finalized GHG reduction goals and measures for energy, transportation, solid waste, water and wastewater, and agriculture sectors. Energy, transportation, solid waste, water and wastewater, and agriculture reduction measures will be grounded in the most recent practices in climate planning with focus on utilizing regional leverage to develop implementable, affordable, and effective policies. Agriculture measures will include qualitative reference to the sustainable agriculture practices and potential funding sources for mitigating emissions from livestock and crop production. The final section will be for wildfire mitigation measures, forest land health strategies, and forestry economic opportunities. And these wildfire mitigation measures will include qualitative strategies related to wildfire mitigation, forest land health, and economic opportunity. All right, so just to give you a high-level idea of what some of the sector-specific measures in the greenhouse gas reduction plan might look like. So for the energy sector, there could be strategies related to implementing energy efficiency retrofits, so looking at lighting, heating, and cooling. The transportation sector, an example would be increasing adoption of low-emission vehicles. Solid waste, increased recycling. For water and wastewater, you can look at increasing pump energy efficiency at water supply and wastewater treatment plants in the region. For agriculture, could establish manure management practices. And then for wildfire, conducting vegetation management, such as forest thinning and defensible space. And the board and planning commission will both be a part of the process to create this list as well. All right, so the greenhouse gas inventory, the emissions are quantified using standardized calculation-based methodologies. It's important to measure greenhouse gas emissions because it allows jurisdictions to track emissions over time and measure overall success in reducing emissions. This inventory accounts for the emissions of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, and these are expressed in carbon dioxide equivalent. There are many benefits to inventorying greenhouse gases. They're able to inform the next steps of emissions reduction planning, and they also allow jurisdictions to monitor and measure success over time. All right, so this report includes two 2018 inventories, a community-wide and a government operations inventory. The community-wide assessment covers emissions activities from the entire county, including residents, businesses, and visitors. The government operations assessment only covers emissions from government facilities and operations. The government operations inventory data is a subset of that total community-wide inventory. So this slide provides an overview of the Calaveras County community-wide inventory. There were 5 sectors analyzed: transportation, energy, agriculture, solid waste, and water and wastewater. These activities resulted in a total emissions of around 370,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, and this equates to a per capita emissions value of about 8.3 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. In 2018, transportation was the largest source of emissions at 67%, followed by energy at 15% and agriculture at 14%. All right, so these are the data sources that we used, and I won't go through this entire slide since it's meant more so just as a reference, but this table includes all of the data that was collected for the inventory in addition to what type of data it was and the exact source. All right, so as mentioned previously, 2 inventories were developed, community-wide and government operations, where the government operations was a subset of the community-wide inventory and included in that inventory. So the government operations assessment covers emissions from county building energy use, waste production, and vehicle use. So these are the results from that government operations inventory. The largest sources of emissions are the county's vehicle fleet at 44% and employee commutes at 39%, followed by energy used at buildings and facilities at 12%. These activities resulted in a total emissions of almost 4,500 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. All right, so the Calaveras County Greenhouse Gas Inventory and Reduction Plan project also includes a wildfire component report, which was conducted by Rincon Consultants. This wildfire assessment includes an analysis of the carbon storage inventories for the county's natural and working lands. This was found to yield a total carbon stock inventory of 74 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. Other key findings include an analysis of the potential GHG emissions impact from wildfires, which was calculated to be over 8 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. The report also provides a wildfire climate change vulnerability assessment and best practices regarding wildfire impact reduction. So what it found was that forest management can have a significant impact on reducing the severity of wildfires and can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions potential by 57%. All right, so as a recap, key takeaways from the 2018 Calaveras County Greenhouse Gas Inventory are total community-wide emissions were 368,569 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, and the largest source was the transportation sector at 67%. The total government operations were 4,493 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, and the largest source of emissions was the vehicle fleet sector at 44%. And the forested land in Calaveras County has an emissions potential of over 8 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent from wildfire impacts as well. All right, so the business as usual forecast, BAU, assumes no changes or variables that might affect emissions over time. So it does not account for any local, state, or federal policies that could impact future emissions. Growth rates were calculated using projections of population, employment rates, VMT projections, vehicle miles traveled, and several other indicator variables. The adjusted business as usual forecast, ABAU, the one on the bottom, does account for emissions reductions resulting from legislative action. This includes statewide vehicle fleet standards and renewable portfolio standards for energy. A critical part of GHG reduction planning is setting up greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets. These targets help guide local governments in developing and adopting energy action policies and programs. They also provide a performance metric by which progress can be measured. So California has set statewide emissions targets, including Senate Bill 32, which specifies a target of 40% below 1990 emissions levels by 2030, and Executive Order B5518, which aims for carbon neutrality by 2045. In order to evaluate Calaveras County's ability to meet these targets, a backtest was conducted to estimate 1990 emissions. And then target lines for SB 32 and B5518 were added to the business as usual and adjusted business as usual forecasts for reference. The emissions gap is the difference between the forecasted emissions and the target values. When Calaveras County considers what target to adopt, it's also good to keep in mind that to comply with CEQA requirements, jurisdictions should meet or exceed SB 32. So for reference, in assisting the county on selecting an appropriate emissions reduction goal, this is a table of nearby jurisdictions and their approved targets. Most recently, the City of Angels Camp City Council adopted targets that are in line with state legislation in their November 2021 meeting, so meeting that SB 32 requirement. All right, so to conclude, it will be important to track progress. Continuing to inventory emissions in Calaveras County will ultimately help monitor emissions and emissions reduction progress and inform future planning efforts. Upcoming planning efforts include the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan development and the subsequent CEQA analysis. This will be occurring through 2022 and early 2023. And it will also be important to coordinate regionally. Coordinating future planning efforts with agencies throughout the counties will help meet goals and targets laid out in the greenhouse gas reduction plan. And again, benefits to the county will include creating that access to funding, creating jobs for county residents, saving the county and its residents money, improving air, water quality, and public health, increasing the county's resilience to the impacts of climate change, supporting economic development, and then streamlining that whole CEQA process. So now we can open it up for any questions, and if Sherry or myself don't have the answer, we will make sure to make a note of it and get back to you. Thank you again.
Thank you. At this time, I will bring it back to the board for any questions or comment to the consultant. Supervisor Callaway?
When are you proposing to have the public outreach on the pre-recorded and survey and comments?
That we were planning on doing towards the end of April and early May. So having that pre-recorded session released towards middle to end of April, and then having a couple weeks open for the survey, and then holding that office hours session close to the beginning of May.
And then you'll be talking, and that I wasn't clear about the inventory and the reduction plan options, or just what the process is and what the greenhouse reduction program is, admissions program. I'm trying to understand what it was specifically you're going to be, those are the things, discuss potential.
Are you talking about specifically in the public outreach process?
No,
or?
that's fine, that's okay. The other one I have is on the wildfire inventory. How does that dovetail with Calaveras?
Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by dovetail?
Well, there's a significant amount of CO2 that comes out either through fires or through removal. The reason where I'm going with this is we're considering possibly doing we've talked about a master stewardship agreement, which would help on a little more regional basis just outside of Calaveras. I'm not sure where this fits in the process, because it seems to me that some permutation of a master stewardship agreement would help us with our greenhouse gas emissions.
Mm-hmm. So this inventory is split into two, and the wildfire inventory and assessment was tagged onto it, kind of like a bonus assignment assessment. For the GHG inventory, it's just purely the built environment. So when we're talking about targeting GHG reductions, we're talking about reducing emissions in the built environment. The wildfire inventory, and I might allow Amber or Gina to tackle that one in terms of the planning process for the county, but if I believe it correctly, it's more just to give information to the county of what stocks exist and what the potential risk is, so that you can plan accordingly and do some forest management from it. Gina, does that sound about right? Or?
I believe so.
Well, we have a huge, I don't know what we have, 40% of our land is in U.S. Forest Service or Bureau. So it would have a significant impact in Calaveras County. I'm just trying to figure out, there's different routes we can take, and some routes we can start now, and some we're going to have to do later in 22 or 23 when we look at the reduction plan. The Forest Service or the Bureau is not a separate entity from the county of Calaveras when we talk about our greenhouse gas reduction. So I just wanted to make sure that I understood how that fits into what it is we need to do. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe the wildfire assessment report was built to help inform and provide a lot of background research for next steps.
Are there any other, sorry, excuse me. Are there any other board member comment?
Just to make sure we adequately answered your first question, sorry about that. The public process will do a recap of the GHG findings, but primarily it is focused on working with the community and stakeholders and the planning commission on talking about potential reduction measures and how to do the next step of developing the reduction plan. That's what that will focus on.
Thank you. Supervisor Stopper?
I would add the Board of Supervisors along with the Planning Commission and the rest of the community with that, as we're doing now. But, you know, not to be argumentative, but as we move forward, there's considerations. Many of the findings and things are stated into the general plan as we're moving forward. I assume that you'll incorporate into the greenhouse reduction plan, such as like our open space part of our general plan, where development's gonna possibly, what's the ratio, 1-to-1 or 50%, where we're gonna have future development procure open space at the same time, which will actually help in reduction moving forward. You know, a lot of the Planning Commission's concerns, I think, may be addressed as we go forward with the public comment and input, along with their input and our input going forward. So we may be able to address some of these issues going forward. I would add also that, you know, some of the things brought up in the greenhouse reduction don't necessarily apply in Calaveras County. I would use an example such as the dairy section, where it's not as prevalent, let's say, as other counties, Stanislaus and others that have it. And I just would say, you know, looking at this in considerations, I would, you know, these greenhouse emissions, we don't have a substantial number. You know, it's on output. I would be interested in knowing what our difference is between 1990 and, let's say, 2008, for instance, or 2020, what our emissions are if we're using it for a baseline. I was all over the place. Some of it was like kind of wants input on the comment thing. I have one question, the baseline question at the very end.
So am I on the right slide?
Right.
Okay. So to understand your question correctly, you were saying the baseline of where we're at right now at 2020?
Yeah, as, let's say, opposed to the 1990 levels.
Yes. So 1990 levels, it's more just for SB 32 to follow that Senate bill. And we were leaning towards that because of plans that meet or exceed SB 32 meet CEQA requirements, and a lot of the intention of this entire project was to perform the CEQA portion of it. So the 1990, I agree, maybe personally it seems not as important, but it was something that was set back in Senate Bill 32 to bring back to drop our emissions level to some certain baseline. But I actually don't know the history of why 1990 was selected. I think since then, though, Executive Order B5518 has been released, so that kind of supersedes Senate Bill 32, and that calls for carbon neutrality by 2045. So when you look at these two graphs, what you're actually looking at is the projection of 2045 greenhouse gas emissions in a business as usual. If nothing changes, then we need to get from this high point down to carbon neutrality, which is 0. And if you look at adjusted business as usual, which does account for renewable portfolio standards and vehicle fleet, policies that are being put in place, then what we're looking at is this gap distance from 2045, which is about 300,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, down to carbon neutrality, so 0.
This is just for me personally. I have another question. When you're running that equation, carbon neutrality, we're with our most recent census, in Calaveras County, we're a population of 45,000 people. We're quite a large region. Much of it's forest farther up. We have many open areas for agriculture in between our communities. Many people live in large parcels. Are we not already carbon neutral?
So again, this is taking into account all the built environment, but not taking into account carbon sinks or carbon sequestration from the natural working lands or natural and working lands. So I agree, I understand what you're saying is that since Calaveras County has so much forested land, would it not be considered in that grand picture carbon neutral? That's not how they're counting the target goals right now for the mandates. They're counting it purely just for the built environment. That's not to say that it might not change in the future, because there is a lot of discussion right now going on about carbon sequestration and the potential for forested lands to offset that. It's just hasn't happened yet.
Well, thank you. That's a good answer. Appreciate it.
Are there any other board comments or questions?
I'm sorry. I have a couple questions, and it has to do with the plan going forward. The state has a lot of mandates out there and a lot of laws that are coming up. Public transportation, all electric by 2029, and then no gas vehicles sold in 2040, and all of those, and now no edible food in landfills. There's another one that's coming. It's not hit us yet. We just had it before us, and it's offset for 5 years. But when we put our plan together, do we put all of that into the plan? Are we allowed to use all of that as a reduction plan and get credit for all of that?
Definitely, because it'll impact your numbers, right? Anything that comes down the pipeline that you are adjusting, like say you start composting organics, or since the majority of, let me go back to that slide. The majority of the community-wide inventory is still transportation. As more electric vehicles are being adopted, that is going to change all of the emissions that are being projected here for Calaveras County, because transportation, that comes from not only your internal residential sources, but it's also coming from visitors. So that will impact the numbers and decrease them.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I have a couple of questions going back to your slide on the process, going back to public comment, which would then impact the reduction plan in the future. How, there's a lot of inventory items that do not resonate with this county. So how are we going to get accurate public comment if they're not identified to the public with the comment. And I'm going to use Supervisor Doppler's comment of dairy. How are we going to mitigate those comments when we're presenting them to the public, when we, in fact, do not have those items? And I know it's a higher level of inventory that you guys have worked on, and I'm not trying to criticize the work, but I'm concerned about the next steps. If we don't recognize those items now, how will that impact down the road for feedback for when it comes back to either the planning, both the planning commission and the board of supervisors?
Can I ask an example, just so I'm clear on what you're asking in terms of what item you might be referencing?
Dairy, miles per vehicle, we're a rural area. We're not compacted into one area where you can take public transportation or use other means. We have to use our vehicles. I mean, there's just certain items that there may not be any mitigation at all because of the way that we're scoped, and presenting that to the public to get feedback that's not going to necessarily fit the solution I have with the inventory being presented. It's going to cause a solution that just do not, we're not going to be able to support. So I'm using dairy and also fleet miles per infrastructure, for example. We can talk about all day long electric vehicles, but you're not going to be able, without an infrastructure in this area, in a rural, not just Calaveras, but rural areas, it's how are we going to present this to the public for that comment?
Right, understood. Yeah, I think, so we often start with the full list of measures and then true out ones that are not applicable or not a good fit for the county. And I appreciated, I'm sorry, I couldn't see the gentleman's, the supervisor's name, comment of including the Board of Supervisors. That, yes, I meant, and I definitely include the Board of Supervisors as part of this public process, and helping us true up what measures are appropriate. So I think we will work closely with everyone. That's what part of the job is to do, is to figure out what's appropriate for Calaveras County and take out the ones that either aren't a good fit or don't even belong, like the dairy feedlots. And to address that too, the way GHG inventories are created, it's created using a lot of standard methodology. And often you can't get the actual numbers for every single point of reference. So what you're doing is you're doing modeled or scaled values that are based on accepted standard practices. The idea behind it isn't to get an exact number, but to get something that is approximate and also comparable. So it's like an apples to apples comparison to other GHG inventories that are being conducted throughout the nation and world. So in the dairy lot or the dairy and feed lot issue, we did recognize that there aren't either of those in Calaveras County, but the way the model is set up, it kind of approximates it. I think, Meredith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Andrew do some back of the envelope and he found out if you took them out, the emissions would actually go up, not down, from the model? So it's an interesting model, and even though it's referenced in the GHG inventory, it's not, we acknowledge that there aren't actually dairy and feedlots in the region. So it will be an iterative process, and we will only be recommending measures that are appropriate for Calaveras County. So in terms of electrifying vehicles, I think that's a nationwide direct discussion right now, and I think it's more just how do we get the infrastructure in place to support that changeover. And it's not, nothing's going to be a fast process, right? It's understood that this will all take some time.
Supervisor Stopper had a comment.
More a question. So if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that you know, based on a standard model, you picking that out, that you can't necessarily pull out, let's say, dairy or feedlots out of it because they aren't really prevalent in Calaveras County. So you're doing a standard number for emissions for those for Calaveras County. So in fact, us not having those here is a reduction. That's why it's a question. I know I said it like a statement. So we're actually getting a reduction by you having that in the model.
Meredith, do you recall, is that technically accurate?
It was more so Rincon, this is the Rincon consultants, they did the agriculture portion of the report. But it's dependent on the data set they use, obviously. So this one data set that they used showed that it did include dairies and feedlots. But one of the consultants at Rincon did a quick calculation to use a different model, a different agricultural model that did not include dairies or feedlots, and it was very comparable. It wasn't necessarily a reduction, since it is just a model and is not necessarily specific, like it's scaled to Calaveras County, but it's not like specific to Calaveras County because those that data just isn't available.
So as we go down the process with the public comment, and you're going to get similar comments that we've just made from our constituents and our stakeholders, at what point do we say, okay, these inventories, we're taking them out of this consideration because A, state mandates, it doesn't, or applying the state mandates, or it does not, it's not applicable to Calaveras County, et cetera, et cetera. How did that work with that inventory down the line? I mean, can we ever not, when can we completely remove them? Or are we never allowed to?
Remove the inventory, or remove, say, specifically like dairy feedlots?
I think there's more than, I think dairy is just the easiest thing because it's visible. I know there are other non-visible things that are out there that are just not applicable. Like there's the natural gas element, there's other, it just, at what point do you start nitpicking and getting the feedback you need to remove these elements rather than working and wasting staff time to find the solutions when there's
right, and I think that's why we're trying to transition to the reduction plan and not focus. So the inventory is more just a point in time, a snapshot to give us a sense of where we're now. It's not supposed to be an exact science. A lot of it is, since you can't get the actual numbers, it will be modeled, but it's trying to give you an idea of where to start. So you know, in our case, like for Calaveras County, that you want to focus a lot of your reduction potential in transportation, right? It is not supposed to be an exact number. It's more just to be a guiding tool to be like, this is where you're at, and this is where you should focus your efforts on. And then, as it is a methodology that is constantly changing, like even inventories that were done a handful of years ago, there are new methodologies out there that improve it. So 5-10 years from now, if you do another GHG inventory, you can true up any data that has become available or any methodology that hasn't been improved since then.
Okay. Last question, or I hope. How do external factors impact this inventory? So for example, propane's a big element of this, or natural gas. However, in the rural areas, we have PSPS, which is changing the way that people are building homes, finding a secondary energy source. So, you know, how do these factor into the public comment aspect when it gets to the resolution?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do feel like resilience, especially with all the PSPS events that happen in our regions now, it's a really big deal for a lot of jurisdictions, and a lot of jurisdictions are focusing on how to mitigate that and also how to mitigate wildfire risk and other resilience-based issues. I think we see these as hand in hand, so that, you know, ideally, when you're looking at this in terms of reducing GHG emissions, you can also look at microgrids or other renewable energy sources that can mitigate PSPS events. So I think it can fit well into the broader discussion. Did I answer your question, or was there another one?
Yes, but I still think it goes back to my earlier comment of, and I get this is the stepping stone to go after funding and what have you, but you don't have the infrastructure or nor the population to support. It goes back to the first argument. We just don't have the infrastructure nor the population to make some of these solutions have an appetite for it. And so we're kind of back at square one where we are right now. But it just, you did answer it. It just goes around and around in a circle, and we end up back in the same square or circle. But
understood. Well, hopefully this will open up some doors and offer funding opportunities that will break through that then.
Okay. I think the biggest thing is just when I look at that list that you have.
Which slide?
I just have and I've expressed this, I think she's on the call with a previous COG director. It's just having number 3 as one of those priorities, it's just a concern with the inventory. And I think that's the biggest, one of the biggest feedback from the Planning Commission and going to be from constituents.
Yeah, I think it would be cost prohibitive to get actual data for everything, and that's why inventories are often based on a specific standardized methodology, because it's more, again, not supposed to be an exact science. So that's why we're trying to just focus on more what the results will be, not results of the planning process, and not on the actual inventory numbers again, because that, again, is just a snapshot in time to give us a guiding point to move forward. If that makes sense.
No, it does. Thank you. Is there any other board comments? Oh, Supervisor Stopper.
I kind of, it's a stretch, and I understand where you're coming from, but the paradox of the 2045 standard of 0 MT CO2e is, it's not a reality without us being able to include our open space out there that's separate from our developed properties. I think Ms. Fullendorf brought up some very good points. We live in a rural area. It takes me 20 minutes to drive to the next town. More often than not, it's 2 towns away where I work. 70% of my population, working population in Rancho Calaveras travels outside the county for work. The reason they live in my area is because it's affordable compared to the rest of the state. Overall, I think that, and this isn't an argument against you. You've been given the standard to work with, and you're trying to develop a solution based on that standard. I just find it paradox to a certain degree. I don't believe that they fully understood the full state when they put forward either the SB or the AB and how we're going to move forward on these. I mean, good intent.
You raised really good points, definitely. And I think, again, they're goals, something to try to achieve. And I wouldn't be too surprised if with all the discussion of carbon sequestration or carbon sink opportunities, that might be built into it, because they might find that many regions can't reach that goal without including that component. So that may be a future change that comes down the pipeline.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I do want to recognize all the work that you guys have put into this, from the COG to your and county staff. I think it's just, we need to ask these, we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't make these comments and ask these questions of you.
Definitely. Thanks.
With that, if there's no other comments or questions from the board, I'm going to turn it over to the clerk to check on Zoom if there's any comments for the public.
There is no public comments at this
Okay, and then we do have one in the room.
Good morning, Supervisors. Ralph Copeland, D4, home of Chair Supervisor Follendorf. Regarding, thank you very much for all your hard work. Regarding your public outreach, if I can ask you just to keep it simple when you're, and keep it where folks can understand, basically plain English, because you have half the county that's over 50 and half the county that's under 50, and that probably describes the computer skills involved. So with that, maybe outreach meetings, maybe mailers involved. But the biggest thing I would suggest that you emphasize in a red county where most of the people don't believe in any of this, and the board is kind of seeping that up as politely as they can, but you must emphasize the impact on the county in your pocket page, or the packet page 101. If you emphasize the impact on the county, especially creating jobs. Amanda's smiling. I like that. Copper Office is looking at growth. There are Tesla charging stations in town square. That's a start. People see it driving up Highway 4. People living there see it. Last week, Sheriff Rick was looking for new vehicles. Okay, I asked the sheriff if he's looked into electric vehicles, and he barely has. I did a quick research just sitting there. I found the Fremont Police Department is staffing all their units with electric vehicles. So that may be something to investigate. And if you're thinking that electric trucks, the Ford Lightning is 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. That's pretty good. And you can get the truck will carry a charge of 300 miles. So you got the electric and you got the performance. Now the rest of the package, that will be up to Ford and what the police requirements would be. But I'd suggest just buying one truck that the sheriff can use, maybe for the fair, maybe for public speaking at schools, maybe just to have around. But in the same thing, if you start with one, others will follow. And Supervisor Stopper, you were talking about your constituents who travel to work. Again, electric vehicles. And I know it's tough, I know it's hard to get your people to change. But electric vehicles is the way it's got to go because of California in their, with their solar and wind, they're using the electricity rather than burning coal and so forth. Anyway, that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ralph. And with this was informational item. There's no action. So I'm not quite sure what, Gina, do you have what you need?
Well, again, we're just looking for direction. Do you want us to go ahead with the using the standardized methodology to determine our inventory and establishing that baseline? Moving on to phase 2, which will be the reduction plan, or is the board suggesting that we take a step back and do more specialized identification of Calaveras County specific inventories as suggested by a few of the planning commissioners.
So what is the feedback from Supervisor Callaway?
Existing.
Okay. Supervisor Stopper?
I would follow up with a question before I say existing. The existing format I mean, with public comment, that could somewhat fit within the realm of what the planning commission's asking for. Is that correct? Is the planning commission's looking at specific issues within Calaveras County that doesn't necessarily fit within the format of what you have right now? Through public comment, is that not addressed?
Amber?
Are you going to take this, or I can jump in?
Sorry. Is
Jump in.
that a tough question?
I think that the inventory does address it, and it makes very clear the methodology and those issues. And I think the way you're going to address it is through the reduction plan and not including measures that aren't relevant for Calaveras. So I think the Plan Commission and the board has acknowledged, those areas that aren't relevant to Calaveras, and that'll be addressed in the reduction plan.
Very, very good. So with that, I'll move forward with the current plan.
Okay. Supervisor Toffenali?
Yes, I will move forward with the current plan based on that. And then the general public input and the planning commission input to build that plan, and what comes out of it comes to the board, and we'll have our input as we go along with it.
Yes.
So I'll vote to go forward.
Okay, and I'll concur with my counterparts. So with that, you have 4 folks giving you your thumbs up.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for all your work. We appreciate you guys being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amber.
Good seeing you guys.
Except for the dairy.
Except for the dairy.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to supervisor announcements, and I will start to my left with Supervisor Callaway.
This weekend is Murphy's Irish Days. It's the first one in a while. We also have a lot of activities for the kids down in Murphy's Park, which will be new. Excuse me. And there's a science award ceremony, a virtual one, tomorrow that I'll be saying a few words at. It's, again, through the STEM program, and excuse me, in the Office of Education. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Toffenali.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a Mountain Valley MS meeting yesterday, and we're moving forward with a list of items that was presented to Stanislaus County as negotiation points for them Stanislaus leaving the JPA June 30th. We'll have some discussions on that. The committee will have discussions with Stanislaus as soon as we set up some timelines everybody can fit with it. And then we have a LAFCO meeting on Monday, and the gist of that meeting is the CSDs, and part of the conversation that the board had a couple weeks ago with CSDs and CSAs. So I'll let you know next Tuesday how that went, because we're going to talk about examining each one of those districts and coming up with a plan recommendation for them.
Supervisor Stopper.
Nothing to report, Madam Chair.
Okay. I'm going to piggyback off of Supervisor Toffenali's comment. Last week, I attended a public meeting in Copperopolis with the Rocky Road Copper Cove CSD, and the community was able to step up and get board members to put in their name in the hat, and they will be working at their next meeting to start building the foundation. But they will need the support of LAFCO so to get where they need to go going forward. They recognize that there's a lot of legwork they need to do internally before they can actually get to filling those potholes. But it was a really successful meeting, so I hope that resolves help the conversation at LAFCO next week. And with that, I have nothing else to report, and we will see everyone next week. Thank you.